Hello guys and welcome back to Monolith 40k. Got another video for you today. Now I'm going to kind of follow up from the previous video we did when we were talking about the points decreases and all that kind of stuff. And I want to talk about the Necron Monolith because I believe the Necron Monolith is going to be making a comeback with this new chapter approved book. So with this video I'm going to be going through loads of buffs that are going to be relating to the Necron Monolith. And yeah, basically explain why I think it's coming back. So as we know guys, from this new chapter approved that's coming out this month, we've got a new Arks of Omen detachment. This is the detachment that we're going to be using and it doesn't cost any command points, which is pretty nice. All we need to do is make sure we fulfill the compulsory battlefield roles in order to use this detachment. So how does this relate to the Necron Monolith? Well, there's actually quite a lot of different bullet points that I need to go through in this video, so you're going to have to bear with me, but there's quite a lot of good buffs that the Monolith's got. So first of all, let's get on to the actual points reduction that the Monolith got. So in the new points decreases, the Monolith is now 270 points, where previously it was 300 points. Now it may actually go further than that because it doesn't actually mention the death rays within this list. So I'm not sure if this has actually been confirmed or not, but as far as I can see, the death rays are actually free. They previously were 5 points per death ray and you were taking 4 of them, so that was actually 20 points. So in theory, this Monolith with the death ray could be 50 points cheaper. The second buff that the Monolith has gained, well, they used to have to take the super heavy auxiliary detachment or a super heavy detachment, but mainly it was an auxiliary detachment because getting 3 Lord of War models in a single game wasn't as easy. But when you used to take a super heavy auxiliary detachment, we lost our detachment ability rules. So all the auxiliary detachments as well as fortification detachments never gained dynasty buffs. Whereas now with this new Arks of Omen detachment, that actually isn't a thing because we can take the Monolith within that detachment, as you can see from the bottom right of the detachment chart there. We can take between 0 and 3 Lords of War models within this detachment, and therefore this isn't an auxiliary detachment, so the Monolith is going to be gaining the dynasty codes. Fantastic. Now I am going to just mention a quick nerf to the codex, but this actually plays into the hands of the Necron Monolith. So some of you already know from the previous video, we've actually lost a little bit in terms of our Necron Dynasty codes. You can't be taking the Eternal Conqueror's Dynasty code alongside one of the other options with the Circumstances of the Awakening list. But previously we used to take the Relentlessly Expansionist alongside the Eternal Conqueror's Ancient Dynasty codes for that 6-inch pre-game move as well as objective secured. You now can't do that. If you are taking OBSEC, you can't take anything else with it. It forces us to go back to the codex, back to the 6 generic Necron Dynasty codes and start to reuse them, which I kind of like, to be honest with you. I didn't like the fact that every player was using the same custom Dynasty codes, so I'm quite fond of this even though it is a nerf. So the two in particular that I want to look at, the first of course is the Nihilak Dynasty, which is now definitely much more better than the Eternal Conqueror's Dynasty code because you've still got your Waller trait, the Relic, the Stratagem, and also the -1 AP in your own deployment zone as well. But the one I wanted to really focus on today is the Novokh Dynasty. I think this is going to be making a huge comeback with this chapter approved edition, especially with the Necron Monolith. So again, bear with me, there's going to be quite a lot of points here, and you're going to see at the end when I kind of put all this together. So from the Meta Watch post on the Warhammer community page on the 5th of January, underneath this photograph of this knight with the Astra Militarum models, there was a little paragraph which says neither the Arks of Omen detachment nor your allied detachment costs any command points, and nor does placing units into strategic reserves. So strategic reserves are free to use for your faction. So how does this relate to the Necron Monolith? There's actually 2 ways that it relates to the Necron Monolith. So first of all, the Necron Monolith's ability, Eternity Gates. So in your movement phase, if this model remains stationary, then in the reinforcement step of this phase, you can summon a unit, you select a Dynasty Core infantry unit that is in strategic reserves and place them wholly within 3 inches of the model, blah de blah de blah. So bearing in mind that strategic reserves are free, so you can be putting any units in, then this only complies with Dynasty Core infantry units and not just Dynasty Core units, and also it's got the Dynasty keyword in fact, so it can't be Triumph Praetorians for example, and it's only going to relate to infantry. But the one I wanted to mention in particular here is the Prismatic Dimensional Breach Stratagem for 1 command point. This is going to be working on all core units as long as they've got the same Dynasty code as the Necron Monolith, so it isn't just infantry, it's all core units. You bring them out of strategic reserves, wholly within 3 inches of your Monolith, and it doesn't require you to be stationary this turn like the Eternity Gate ability does. The next step into this bit of synergy is bearing in mind that the Monolith has got the Deep Strike ability. Now I know it is a bit of a clunky model, it's quite large, especially going around terrain and things like that, but it's got the Deft Descending ability, so you can set it up in the upper atmosphere and then you'll be bringing it down in turn 2 in your reinforcement step, as long as you are 9 inches away from enemy models. So that will count as movement, so the Eternity Gate isn't going to be useful for that turn, which is why I wanted to kind of talk about the stratagem as opposed to the actual ability. So what does this mean? What units can you be bringing out of strategic reserves which you've put into strategic reserves for free? You've got your Lich Guard models, of course, they're a very obvious unit to talk about. You can talk about the Canoptic Spiders, which have made a little bit of a comeback in the last chapter approved book. Now they are monsters, but as mentioned, this doesn't relate to infantry anymore when you're using the stratagem. You've also got your Scorpic Destroyers, which are one of our most punchiest units within our codex. And you can even talk about Necron Warriors, just getting them up the board, getting them into Ghost Reaper range. So yeah, take a lot of shots with 20 of those guys. Now I want to throw the example out here. I've got a couple of Tau broadside battle suits, and I'm going to show you exactly what I'm talking about. So the Monolith can come in on turn 2 using the Death Descending ability, which is Deep Strike. You're coming in more than 9 inches away from enemy models. So I've just put here 9.1 to be clear. So you're coming in 9.1 inches away, and this is where you pop the stratagem, because it's the reinforcement step of your movement phase, and now you're going to be selecting a Dynasty core unit from strategic reserves. So this is where you can also bring in your Lich Guard alongside the Necron Monolith, as long as they are wholly within 3 inches of your Monolith. So what does that mean in terms of trying to get these guys into a charge? Well, at this present time, if they're wholly within 3 inches and you use your maximum allowance, obviously there'll be terrain and things like that potentially could be in the way, but let's just, for the sake of argument, say that it's a plain battlefield, it's not in the way. These Lich Guard models should be slightly over 6 inches away from those battlesuits. Now this is the part where you remember we're in the Novokh Dynasty here. It's a +1 to the charge rolls. So now all of a sudden that 6.1 inch now becomes 5.1 inch. So yeah, you've just got a 5 inch charge to get within the engagement range of the enemy models. And it doesn't have to be Lich Guard as mentioned, it could be the Canoptic Spiders if you want to get the damage 2 weapons off. Again, it could be a Scorpic Destroyers, or maybe you don't want to even go for the charge, maybe you just want the Necron Warriors as mentioned. In fact, you could even leave a little bit of a gap just to throw in your Necron Monolith into the charge, because they're actually pretty tasty in combat as well, especially now that you've got the Dynasty code and potentially a +1 to the strength using the command protocol of Hungry Void. So the Eternity Gate ability is only going to relate to infantry models, but if you're using the Stratagem Prismatic Dimensional Breach, that's going to relate to all core units within the same Dynasty code. So in fact, if you were playing the Zerakan Dynasty, okay, you're not going to get a +1 to the charge roll, but in theory, you can actually bring out the Silent King because it's a core unit. Not something I personally would do, but yeah, you've got the option of doing that. So in summary, the Monoliths are 30 points cheaper, the Death Rays potentially now are 3, we're going to be gaining the Dynasty codes for our Necron Monolith. The Novokh Dynasty looks very useful now, especially because strategic reserves are now free, so it's going to be a great method of getting units into play. So for me, this feels like the new Veil of Darkness relic in fact, because we all love our Veil of Darkness relic. It's a once per battle item though, and it can only be used on one character alongside one core unit, whereas the Monolith could be doing this every single turn, pulling models in, pulling models around, and the Monolith itself is quite a hefty unit, and yeah, being cheaper now and not requiring another detachment, yeah, there's a lot of benefits for taking a Necron Monolith. So guys, yeah, I can't wait to get my Monolith back out on the battlefield, and hopefully this becomes a little bit more competitive than it once was. So guys, that's what I think is coming in terms of the Monolith and this new chapter approved book. Let me know if you agree with me down below. I mean, this also could relate to the Night Scythe. Not something I particularly use, but you could also use that stratagem with the Night Scythe. So yeah, let me know down in the comments below if you agree or disagree. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. We're putting out all this new content. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.